I agree with you. It's just so hard to, I don't even know that their infrastructure, they even know how to market something to get people to know about it. And there's so much content now. So it is, so also just right back at you. Thank you for watching it and writing about it and talking about it, because I think it's something really worth, everyone who has seen it has been so effusive that it's been really cool. But yeah, just it's important to, it's like it's like the grassroots system,
Right, yeah.
Word out. I'm counting on this interview to basically be most of her marketing campaign. High hopes for JoBlo.
Have faith there is some way out of this. Getting emotional won't help. So don't get emotional.
So the series is crazy good. I loved it very, very much. And the sad thing is that I didn't even know about it until you had reached out and emailed me.
Yeah.
Like Jet, I knew about. I had seen the trailers, I had heard everything about it, and typically when the two of you are doing something, I'm first in line to check it out. But I had not seen very much about this. So, I mean, how did it even come about? Was it always envisioned as a series? Was it start as a movie? How did it come about?
No, it was always envisioned. How did the marketing campaign, the experiment that you're part of, come about? I can't, speak to that. It might be a new experiment to say, like, what if you put something out and don't advertise it? People might find it because there's not enough shows or streamers or networks to choose from, so they'll just find it. So I can't speak to that. But no, this came about as a series. This really had a lot to do with the pandemic. Like, this was during COVID 1.0. Carla and I found ourselves in Austin for several, when it was supposed to be just 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, the world will come back. And then it was months and months of that. Right. And so at first, I was okay not doing anything for a while. And then once people started going back to work and I started hearing all the stories about Carla's actor friends, everybody was having to go to work under these sort of like Eastern European prison conditions where you had to be in a van and you couldn't breathe and you had a mask. And I thought, well, I wonder if, what happens if you write something that takes place in a place that you don't leave once you're there, but you don't leave because you don't want to, because it's amazing. Right. And I thought, you've always been able to do a movie like The Big Chill or Ex Machina or like a one location or one set movie. And so really the idea came from there. It came from like, what if I grab like a familiar situation, like Cul-de-sac is one of my favorite movies. Polanski's Cul-de-sac is like thieves break into a house and we think it's going to be about that. And then we just get into what's happening in that house with different characters there and just make it all about, make the place really important in the story. So it was always envisioned as half-hour chunks to tell that story.
You received a phone call about an emergency?
Alba?
Get down. We just need a place to lay low for a little while.
Are you having people over?
Yes.
Cancel it.
We can't.
Phone lines are down.
It is interesting to your point about the not knowing about it, though, because we are in such a fascinating time in that way. We did make it independently and then sold it. And that was kind of the way to be able to make it, and to be able to make it. It is such an unusual, and what people who have seen it are really responding to is that, and I think that's super indicative of Sebastian's writing anyway, as you know, but people really don't know where it's going to go. And it does take you on this sort of very immersive ride. But if that had been noted to death by a bunch of people and a bunch of executives and a bunch of, it really wouldn't have been able to be what it was. So both the fact that we were able to make it and have it be what we wanted it to be is the key, because in the end of, eventually all you have is that end product. So at least you want that to be reflective of what you set out to make, since it's so hard to make anything. But I do think we're in a really interesting time right now, and it is going to have to shift, because then in selling it to Peacock, who is extremely excited about it, and all of those things, and T Plus, who's a part of that particular venture with this show, there is just I agree with you. It's just so hard to, I don't even know that their infrastructure, they even know how to market something to get people to know about it. And there's so much content now. So it is, so also just right back at you. Thank you for watching it and writing about it and talking about it, because I think it's something really worth, you know, everyone who has seen it has been so effusive that it's been really cool. But yeah, just it's important to, it's like
Once
it's like the
Joe-
grassroots system, you know.
once
Right,
Joe
yeah.
put the word out. I'm counting on this interview to basically be most of her marketing campaign. I have high hopes for JoBlo.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there's something to be said, Carla, about the things that you've been in recently. I think that there's maybe a genre that can just be created of Carla in a house, because you got Gerald's Game in a house, Haunting of Hill House in a house. I mean, you've got all of these things where the house in this becomes almost a character as well. It is such a cool, like the hiding spaces and just the setting itself. Like even when you watch at the very beginning, you've got this view and there's other houses that are within proximity, but it also feels very isolated. So that idea of isolation, like you're saying, this came about during the pandemic. Was that idea of isolation a theme that was playing into the story as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, you know, that, like I said, that initial moment, because it shifted now 3 years later, people are just so bored of talking about it, bored of the whole thing. But that initial moment that felt to me like, all right, we've always been told the world can change in a second. And now everybody collectively knows what that feels like. And it became such a moment for reflection. Like, well, what do I want to do? Am I with the right person? Do I have the right job? Like all those things that I thought was like, this is a really interesting moment. The story definitely went that way. Like it was very, very important for me that the story ultimately is about nature and being in this place where human beings have, you know, sort of, you know, gotten into a place where they don't belong, right? And the tidal waves and the moon and all these things are existing without needing them. And the idea of hijacking the crime story with the story about human nature taking over was very much where the instinct came from. But I think it was instinctive. It was just like sitting there reflecting on things and going like, this moment creates just like a feeling of yearning, and that yearning could be either for disruption or for creation. And without giving too much away of what happens in the story, that really is what it's about. It's about like, how do these things take over? You know, I think it's interesting that, you know, you can gender swap almost anything, but nature, Mother Nature, nobody ever says that it's Father Nature. Like Mother Nature is a very female, the most important energy that is not objective. It's very subjective, and just like, you know, the waves will come in, or the ocean, or the earthquake, that will destroy people, whether it's good or bad. It has nothing to do with morals. And in the story, of course, it sounds a little, you know, lofty. That's what it really is about. It's like, you know, I like stories where it not only mixes genres, but you think one thing is going to happen, and then it was about something completely different. And that's what I wanted to tell with the story, was this sort of tale about an impossible, violent love in a heightened situation.
Welcome.
She's beautiful.
I've never stolen anything in my entire life.
One of the bags is missing. Where did you hide it?
Touch that gun so I can blow your head off.
There's also something really interesting in playing within that environment, just as an actress, in terms of the feeling of exploring the notion of, if you weren't being watched, what would you do? And that, of course, is very indicative of nature too, you know, in terms of, it's rare to have that kind of strange opportunity present itself. And so that was a really fun thing to play with. And also, I think very much so, because we had a very small cast and crew, and once everybody was clear of COVID, literally nobody left for over 2 months. So we lived, worked, you know, filmed, ate, all in this extraordinary place.
Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies. So,
yeah, no, thankfully we had a really good group, but yeah, it could have.
Some of them did come back.
They just had to be cut out of, so you never will know about them.
Nice.
Literally.
Yeah. But it was, you know, I think that it's so easy to say, you know, the location's a character or whatever. And obviously they are. I mean, you know, you spoke about the Haunting of Hill House. You know, when I walked onto that house was a stage, which is the craziest part. And it was the most extraordinary stage I've ever seen of a house ever. I mean, the second you walked to that door, you felt like you were in a house that was hundreds of years old. It was truly extraordinary. But in this, I think more than anything ever in my career, the environment was so influential because it influenced sort of who we all were. Like so much of any kind of research that you might do or anything like that was just laid in immediately upon landing, you know. And since the whole show is a little bit like a breath, you know, a breath in and a breath out, it felt very much like that doing it as well.
And it does remind me of, there's a particular scene that strikes me whenever I'm thinking about the series, and it's the scene where Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character is kind of outlining what the plan is going to be. And every time the camera shifts, it's a different character that he's talking to. And at first the thought is this misleading us to think that we don't know who it was he actually had the conversation with? Did he have a conversation with all three? And it struck me ever since back, it's going to date myself here, back in high school, worked at a Blockbuster Video, and you had the movies that were categorized as the sexy thriller were always these really cheap Red Shoe Diaries type of trashy movies that people disregarded because sex was looked at as pornographic in a way. It wasn't looked as something empowering. But this scene, I could see 20, 30 years ago, people would look at this scene and go, there's a guy and now there's a girl, and it's a guy and a guy and a guy and a girl. Now it's not even a question. Like, people don't even look at it as something that we need to really worry about, but we still do live in a fairly puritanical society in the United States where this kind of thing is looked at as, oh no, we can't let anybody watch this because sex is wrong. We can't show nudity or anything like that. It becomes very empowering, and sex is very much, and sexiness is very key in this story. And a lot of the projects that you do, it's an empowering kind of thing. Was there anything that Peacock, in taking this on, that they said, well, maybe we need to tone this down, or was it just they took it as you created it?
Yeah, they didn't ask for any of that.
Amazingly
which was really
so.
refreshing.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think, to Carla's earlier point, I think it's testament to, because I completely agree. It's like, look, I think sex, I believe in sex as a positive energy in the world. It actually is. And in art, one of the great things that we can do is, and what, for whatever reason, is in all the stories that I write, is that combination. We're trying to illustrate that you know, dynamic between the spiritual and the sexual, because I think most human beings are trying to figure that out. So I have always found it really strange that in independent films, in American independent films, like, sexuality is usually only allowed if it's a negative thing, or somebody gets raped, or somebody's ashamed, or something, you know, that's the only time that it's considered quote unquote serious. And Europeans don't seem to have this hang up, and even other North Americans like Mexicans don't have this hang up either. So it's a funny, not funny, haha, but a peculiar thing that you go like, huh. And yet this country consumes all the pornography in the world, make all the pornography in the world. So it's like, behind closed doors, it's okay. But so that hypocritical thing, which I'm not even really interested in actually addressing that. I just assume that people are going to be okay with it because sex is actually really cool, you know? And it was really a relief that Peacock didn't say anything about that.
Yeah, no.
But to Carla's point, I think had we been developing it with Peacock, they might have said, hey, is this too much? Or we're going to lose the audience here. Or those concerns that people have where they're assuming the audience is not going to be able to accept something. And, you know, and by the way, since you've seen the show, Leopard Skin has many things that are not mainstream. Like, this is not for the widest audience. You know, some people will be like, I don't know, this is kind of strange, but that's okay. Like, we have, like, a lot of this came from that initial COVID, you know, 1.0, as I was saying, of, I caught up on watching all the TV shows. I'm talking about the era of, like, everybody's making sourdough bread and watching The Tiger King, and then you watch Money Heist, and then you watch Babylon, and you watched everything. And after a while, I thought, a lot of these shows, once you get to the other ones, are behaving in very conventional ways. Like, we all know all of this, and now we've all had the chance to watch everything. And I thought, this could be like a really cool moment to start making things that are a little bit stranger, because we know all of these conventions and we're all at home watching them. But it's a little bit, to date myself, the way that I felt. Like, there was that moment in American independent cinema when Sex, Lies, and Videotape came out, and you know, and Wild at Heart came out, and Quentin's, you know, Reservoir Dogs came out, where it seemed like American independent movies were going to be this kind of crazy, sexual, violent, auteur, Jean-Luc Godard meets, you know, Brian De Palma meets Kurosawa, you know, and that moment kind of like very quickly became a more naturalistic thing, and we had to be more serious. And I'm always like, what's wrong with you know, color saturated things and flamboyant things, and like, shouldn't you be able to attack the theme with whatever tools you have to like illustrate things, when we all know what a TV procedure, police procedural is like,
Right.
or we've all seen all these things. So you watch these like British TV shows or the supernatural shows or like Stranger Things, and you kind of know where you're like, yeah. And then yeah, and they give you answers all the time. And so it became very key. And this is like, what if we don't give all the answers? What if we ask a lot of questions and we just have like images and things that behave more like a dream, because the whole world feels like we're in this collective dream state.
I need someone to bring me the diamonds.
You're not among friends here.
We're not making it out of this alive.
I think also before everything was tested within an inch of its life, there were, you know, I've always thought a sign of a great movie or a great book or a great piece of music is that you kind of leave and you've got all these things stirring inside, and then you go to dinner with friends and you start talking about it and you're sort of like, you felt that? Oh no, I felt this way. I'm still not sure about that one, you know. And some movies that I have thought that I've been very resistant to while watching, I then have been kind of obsessed with later, and like, that was kind of brilliant what just happened there, you know, and or vice versa, movies that I have gone, oh, that was so fun, and it just sort of assimilated really easily, and later I'm like, I can't really remember that movie. So I think that the point is that there is this thing of testing and of giving people cards to actually, whether you say it or not, and now they're just saying it, but it's like, judge the movie from the start. So judge it. So you're judging good, bad, right, wrong, like, don't like, you know, and it's always sort of fascinating to me, because you think that's actually never the way to go into a piece of art. Like, that's never the way to go into an experience and hope for something interesting to come of it. So I do think in this moment, you know, originally, like sort of when the streamers started gaining some, you know, sort of that momentum, it felt like, oh, we don't need to appeal to everybody. We're just going to go for this niche group. Oh, these people like this thing. Great. We can just find those people for that. So I think there's still that left over, but then there's also this sort of thing now of like, well, we got to reach everybody. So I think everyone is a little confused. And I think that the only thing we can do is just keep trying as storytellers to tell the stories that we're interested in, and hope that, you know, as is everything, if it's done well, it's like the most personal can become the most universal.
And I think that that's a really great point, especially with streaming. One of the things I love back at the video store was discovering something on the shelf that I had not seen, didn't see a trailer for it. And what's nice with the streamers is that you can go on there and you can find something that maybe you didn't even know. Maybe it's from another country, maybe it's from 15 years ago, you don't know. And I felt that way kind of about The Haunting of Hill House, that it was not something that anybody knew about, because Mike Flanagan was not a filmmaker whose name was as big as some others.
Mm-hmm.
Streaming is nice because you can also tell a long form story. And this doesn't feel necessarily like a television series. It feels like a film broken into multiple chapters.
You're totally right about that.
Yeah, so it's like each one ends and then starts, and it's got different feels, and you're picking up with different characters, and it moves back and forth, and it's so dynamic. It almost feels like in some ways you could watch the episodes out of order and get the story in a slightly different way. And I really liked that when people go on, you sometimes get those suggestions in a streamer where it says, we think you'd like this. And I think that this is one of those series that people would probably discover that way.
Right.
But the marketing and the trailers and everything, once I saw it, once, you know, you reached out and I then checked out the trailer, I'm like, how did I miss this? This is like exactly the kind of thing that I would want to see. Is this something that, Sebastian, do you envision yourself working more with a series format, or do you think that you'll return more to filmmaking in a traditional way?
That's a great question. I mean, the truth is, I love movies. What I like to make are movies, and both Jet and this are movies. It's just that now, unless you really got in through whatever side door or front door, or whether you're really, really a fan of Marvel movies, there's not that many movies that are made. Mm-hmm. And so you end up having to make like an 8-hour movie or a 4-hour movie. I would love to make a 2-hour movie. I love movies. But for example, I'm working on a series right now, another series that I'm super excited about in Europe, and it's a heist series, and I can't talk too much about it. But again, I had to write 8 episodes, which I'm not complaining, but then you have to do them really fast. So in a way, Leopard Skin, you're right to say that it feels more like a movie. I felt the same way about Jet, which is I'm not really a TV person. And I don't mean that in the pretentious, I think TV is great. But my point is like what I know about are movies. So really good TV behaves in a way where every episode there's certain expectations that are met. And I don't really know how to do that well. My idea for TV is always like, what if each episode is like a different movie? And can it be like different styles? And can one be a horror movie and one be a musical, which is not what people necessarily want. I mean, they want that like once every 30 episodes, not every other. So with both Leopard Skin and Jet, my idea was like, what if each thing feels like its own cool little movie? So I will continue doing that. Well, you know, if I have the opportunity to do that. But if you know of anybody that has money to make a movie, I love a 2-hour narrative because I hate the way that TV stretches things out. I love long storytelling, but I freaking hate the fact that you see a great show and like third season sucked and hopefully you'll get it back for the fourth season. It's like, you know, 3 seasons seems about enough for like act 1, act 2, and act 3, and like, let's get out, let's plan it in whatever, 30 episodes or 24. I wish that in today's world, when it's like, it's going to get rebooted in 2 years anyways, guys, like, what if you just finish it in 3? I understand there's a lot of money being thrown your way, but then come back to make another one with the same cast and come back 2 years later. So I think somewhere in there was the answer to the question, which is, I love movies. Right now, it seems like character-driven stuff you need to do in TV, and they let you do it in TV. And I'm like, great, if you can do that and be funny and have sex and have suspense, you know, and that seems like a more grown-up thing than what they let you do in a lot of movies right now.
What I did hear you say is that you would love to make a horror musical starring Carla. That's what I heard you say.
Just
I'm in.
I can
Awesome.
imagine so many
Love
different genres to cross with Carla starring in them. That's what's amazing. You know?
That would be
In a
awesome.
house, obviously in a house.
In a house, one house.
What kind of house?
It's
We don't
just
know.
any kind of house. I need to, you know, maybe like a houseboat, you know,
Nice.
maybe it's overboard.
It's like Cape
Um,
Fear meets- yeah,
Horror musical Overboard. I am in, definitely.
yeah, with a sprinkling of Cape Fear, exactly.
Exactly. And Carla, I mean, you have worked with some filmmakers multiple times. And obviously that's because there's a trust with the filmmaker. You like working with them. You know, Zack Snyder's got his particular approach to doing things. Mike Flanagan obviously has got his approach to doing things. And Sebastian, what would you say is
Robert Rodriguez.
Robert Rodriguez.
and Robert Rodriguez? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and each one of them has a very distinct style, and something that is key in all of them is that women are empowered characters. They are allowed to be sexy. They're allowed to be women, but they're also not separated just because they are women and secondary to the male characters. Is that something key for you when you're choosing projects, that the female roles are designed in that kind of way?
Maybe, sorry to interrupt, maybe you brought this out in all of those different directions.
It's very possible.
Oh, I don't think that, but I really like your thinking. You know, it's interesting because I think what it hasn't been as conscious as that, as much as it has been an instinctual feeling, which is, oh, I'm not really interested in being smaller than I am. In fact, I would rather play characters that I find parts of me I wasn't even aware of and get to explore those, since I do feel like, you know, one of the great gifts as an actor is that you see the world through different people's eyes. And that's always been from when I decided to act when I was 13. It was like, this is maybe a chance to give empathy and allow people to see things that a world in which they could go, oh my gosh, I actually do understand this person, but I've never lived anything like that, because that was what happened to me watching movies as a young person. And so I think at this point, yes, I'm so glad that, you know, I'm not really interested in let's plug the woman in and make her the bad guy, just because, you know, women didn't really, you know, but like, it's these strange sort of like that stuff. I sort of feel like, no, let's go. Women are super complex and they are a lot of things. And that is really interesting to have a filmmaker who is fascinated by that and not scared of it. And I think that's that for sure. I gravitate towards that. I think I also gravitate towards, you know, auteurs. I mean, it's true that Zack Snyder doesn't write all his own material, but he has a very strong vision for what he wants, and he creates an environment in which creativity can happen. And so I would say all of those examples, you know, obviously the deepest and sort of most nuanced relationship is with Sebastian, because of our lives and our history and our you know, similar, just something that really clicks in that way. But for all those filmmakers who I love working with,
How would you rank them though? As filmmakers?
I would say that, you know, what's something really also interesting about all of them, which is kind of fascinating that I hadn't thought about before, is that none of them are abiding by the notion that, oh, you're a personality who plays one thing. You know, I set out very early on with the intention of being a transformational actress, you know, and I think that came with a very sort of like naive mindset. But then really, when I've looked at it in retrospect, I'm like, oh no, I still feel exactly the same way, which is I want to disappear into things so people can believe that character. And I could have become a much bigger name or all of those things,
like a brand,
or a brand, or, you know, had I made a lot of different choices that came my way. And at this point, I feel really, you know, even just as adamantly about that. And all of these filmmakers have given me such vastly different characters to play.
What the hell happened?
When we were ambushed, they knew we were coming.
I remember when I did Spy Kids and played the mom in Spy Kids, and then Robert asked me if I would play Lucille, you know, in Sin City, and I was like, yes, this, you know, but it's and certainly, I mean, it's that, so that's an interesting, you know,
yeah, I
as well.
think, you know, the word auteur, of course, gets considered very pretentious, but in the real, if you look at people who are authors of what they do in theater or in movies, always Preston Sturges or whoever you want to come up with, it's like these are people who recognize a company of actors that then they wanted to work with those actors over and over and give them different things to do because it makes sense.
Right.
Because you find people that you have a shorthand with, you're like, you'd be really good as a killer next time, and next time you're gonna be the lawyer. It's like, it's a really fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So I always say that Carla is I have a theater company and she's like the centerpiece, and I can grab new people, or she meets someone who's like, this person could be good for this, and you just introduce new people. And I think that Robert and Zach and Mike do the same thing, which is like, if you find people that are willing to jump off a thing with you next time, why wouldn't you do that? You know, and often in Hollywood, because it's so not personal, directors don't get to do it. They don't have the choice, or they're stuck with this person or that person. But I think it makes all the sense in the world. It's like making movies is a game of pretend, and you're just running around playing cops and robbers. It's like, we'll do it with the people who have become your friends that you respect, you know, and if they can become stars and get you the money to do it, all the better, you know. It's like promote from the inside.
It was so fun with Leopard Skin and with Jet. Bruce Greenwood came in and played with us on Jet, and but it was so fun with Leopard Skin because Amelia Eve and I had done Bly Manor together, and so when, you know, we were looking to who to cast for that, and I mentioned her to Sebastian, and then that ended up being, you know, you guys had
it was
such
all
a
by
good
Zoom too.
Yeah, it was like, so
again, nobody could fly anywhere. It was all pandemic.
And she's so fantastic in both of those roles, and they are totally different roles, obviously. And Jeffrey Dean Morgan from Watchmen, so that goes back to Zack Snyder, and Gentry from Jet, and Haita from Jet, and so it's been it's so fun that way. And then to meet, of course, new people. I mean, you know, to sort of
Philip we'd never worked with before.
and Jodie
I'd
Turner
seen him
Smith on Jet.
Direct back.
Yeah.
And he was so funny in this. He's so good.
Yeah, and that's the thing that was interesting also with Philip, is that he's known, and he's so good with physical action and just action stuff in that way that it's easy to say like, oh, they're good with action, but like, as we know, you're either good with it or you aren't, and if you aren't, you can't make anything work in that, you know, realm. It can sort of take you down.
It's good to know that a guy can throw a punch and take a punch.
Yeah.
Stuntman needed. You're like, oh, I got this. You're like, okay,
Exactly.
one take, here we go.
But what we didn't know and just sort of intuited, and Sebastian had a really strong sense from the start, is just he's like Billy Wilder, like he's back to this sort of like wonderful old school comedy, His Girl Friday kind of,
He's a theater guy, so he's fun.
Yeah.
He's very precise. It was
and
so
the whole
cool.
cast is phenomenal in that. And I would say, to kind of like the point you were talking about, that the project itself is going to, whether something is good, whether somebody enjoys it, is the most important thing. It doesn't, you know, you don't have to go out and make something that is arduous and 55 episodes long. If you can tell the story and you have a core group of actors and they really deliver on that story and people are entertained, then obviously that's a big win. And I just wanted to, you can take this any way you want. I'm definitely intending it as a compliment. But for me, when I'm thinking about filmmakers and actors, and I'm thinking about what projects like stick in my mind, and if somebody's going to ask me, what were they in that you're going to remember, or what did they make that you're going to remember, just because going back to the video store days where I saw literally everything. And for Sebastian, for you, it's like, oh yeah, it's this awesome movie called She Creature. And for Carla, it's like, yeah, she was in Son-in-Law, you know,
right?
It's going back
Totally.
to these things that are, I mean, obviously this is so totally different than both of those. But what's awesome is that it can be these actors like Amelia, and you can have all of these actors that are doing things that are different than what you've expected and really make something exciting out of it in that way. And I do think that the more people that were in the house in any given episode, the more pumped up things got, the more entertaining having people pair off and be in these different dynamics. Because of the nature of the material, when the cameras weren't rolling, was everybody just, it looks like it was a blast to have all these people in one place. Was it enjoyable and fun when the cameras weren't rolling as much as it is when they are?
Yeah, it was a blast, but maybe we should actually like come clean and explain just how small that thing was, because it was literally, we took over this resort in the Dominican Republic, this beautiful place, because they were coming off the worst tourist season in the history of the world. So all of it happened because of COVID. It was like, hey,
like we would have never gotten that place.
Can we get that place and actually live there and film there? So it was actually, when I met the crew members and the actors, it was a little bit like, hey, if I haven't worked with you before, it's like, I just want you to know that if what you like doing is dancing all night and doing a bunch of drugs and partying, that's not going to happen. But this is more like yoga summer camp for actors, in that we're going to be at this one place. We literally didn't even have a car. So once you were there, you could never leave the location.
Really
So
well.
we were being tested for COVID 3 times a week. Like nurses would come in from outside, but nobody was allowed in. So it was a crew of 9 people and a cast of 8 people. And that was it. There was nobody else there. And so, so we would shoot in a bungalow that was, I mean, I was barefoot for 70 days in a row. You just walk in the sand, go shoot. And if you didn't get to the end of the scene that day, you were like, there wasn't even locks on the doors. You're like, all right, we'll pick this up tomorrow. And people would go surf and have dinner together. It was truly, I hate to sound like an asshole, paradise, because people were like, are you kidding me? Like the whole world has shut down. How did we didn't know it was going to work out that way, but it's like, how did we figure this thing out? We're in this beautiful place. It was the most grounding, and it sounds so new age nonsense, but it's like having your feet in the sand and the ocean every day. And that's why the story is so ethereal too, because it's infused with this feeling of like, we're just like little human beings, and this whole nature thing is much bigger than us.
Yeah.
And it was really healthy and really easeful, you know. And the Lord of the Flies joke earlier, I was worried. I was like, what if people go crazy and start killing each other? You know, what's going to happen? Like, is it going to be like stir crazy? But it was so expansive, this beach. It was a 3,000 acre nature preserve. It was just like animals and insects and bugs and double rainbows and whales. Like, it was truly like, we might have like pulled something off here that's totally different. So it's less, so the question is more like, did we cut and we were like all laughing? Yes, but also just kind of being like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Like people were going through stuff like with family or whatever. The whole world had kind of like stopped, and like, you know, the crew were like, can you just keep writing? Like, I don't want to go back to LA to work on a show with a mask with a thing, you know, like it was really became like a very deep experience in a very simple way. And what was cool is that the material that we were doing, it would have been fine if it was a romantic comedy too, but it was kind of challenging. It was kind of strange.
That's
so
what
so it's not like it was just like, hey, we're on vacation. It was like, we really had to focus, and we all had to wear like 5 different hats because we didn't have enough people to do everything.
I think that was also, I think if it had been something sort of like that didn't require much of us, it wouldn't have been as magical. I think it was actually the fact that the material was demanding, and the schedule was tight. I mean, like, you know, there was a sense of purpose that then allowed the crazy environment we were in to feel just like a dream, you know. But I think had we gone and done some sort of like, let's improvise and do put a comedy together, you know what I mean? I think that would have been fun for sure, and an escape from what was going on in the world on some levels. But this was actually you know, like it was something that, for example, I don't think we strayed from the script, but a couple of words of something that Sebastian was like, oh, let's shift this, or this voiceover. I mean, it was really, really specifically laid out. And again, that's the only way you could do it with, you know, I mean, you see how beautiful the show is. And we had literally 3 people in the camera department, you know, who were all moving their own lights. And then we would be moving their lights with the thunderstorms, and, you know, so it was. So
it was a little film school, like, or theater troupe, let's put on a show.
Yeah.
We just had planned what we needed to. It's like, we have this location, we have this production design already built in, we have these things. It's like, we can pretty much do everything we need to do. But that's obviously why the story is both so internal about the people in the house, and using what we have there, which is the beach and the ocean and the imagery of nature that keeps, infusing everything.
By the way, going back to troops, it dawned on me that also Jet, if you go back to She Creature, both Rhea Kilstead and Gil Bellows are in Jet and were in She Creature.
I thought you were gonna say, going back to Troops, you were also in Troop Beverly Hills.
Oh, that's
Nice.
true.
But
That's true too.
Awesome. Well, the show's phenomenal. I really enjoyed it a lot. Anything I can do to get the word out. I've already been telling as many people as I can to check it
Thank
out.
you.
I'll continue to
But,
do so.
but truly, thank you so much. Yeah, it's keep going if
Yeah, I
you
think
feel
we started that
inspired.
whole petition thing to Peacock for season 2 and all the million signatures.
Exactly.
Yeah, like just let us know if we need to send T-shirts or what, Carla will sign some photographs.
We can show you too who was, without exaggeration, come here, below at least 80% of the frames of the entire show is this little guy.
This is Melville, yeah. What was
He was down there and he was literally underneath camera for most of the shots. He started to understand that as soon as action happened, he just went down. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really
Thank you
appreciate
so
your
much.
time. It's
So
been a
good to
great
talk in
pleasure
person.
talking to both of you. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Likewise.
Be super well. Speak soon.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
All
Bye.
right.
Take care.